Yeah. All right, we'll get the tea farers a minute. How's everybody online doing? You guys want some tea?
I would love to have some. Sounds
Definitely would love
amazing.
some of that.
So we're I know I see a couple new faces. So it was Kevin that just joined us. Where are you, Kevin?
Hey all, yes, Kevin Lanzo here. I'm a pharmacist. Right now I'm joining from South Florida. I'm at my parents' house visiting right now, but normally I live in San Francisco.
Okay.
So I'm tuning in, not from New York, but hopefully to learn more about it and see how your work is relevant to other states and to see how I can help from a distance too.
Fantastic. All right. And Lizzie, have you dialed in before? There is a Lizzie. No. And Claire, you've joined us before, right? Yeah.
I haven't. No, this is my first time. Thank you all for having me. And I'm tuning in from New York, from Chinatown, Lower Manhattan. I'm currently a student at Fordham in social work, and I'm really invested or wanting to get invested in policy for legalizing psychedelics. So I came across your organization, and my professor is actually going to coach me this summer in trying to push this policy memo through that I'm essentially asking for legalization and decriminalization options, but also through a multicultural lens and one that is counter corporate capture. So we shall see, fingers crossed, but really looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say. And I really do want to help out in any way I can. So excited to be here.
Cool. And Alex, thanks for tuning in again. Good to see you back. Yeah. Yeah, he joined us at the lobby game. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so if you didn't already know, this is our May New Yorkers for Mental Health Alternatives meeting. My name is Avery Stemple. I am the Upstate co-president. Pammy really wanted to join us, but she unfortunately is moving right now, and she texted me saying that she just got to her apartment and won't be able to dial in. But Pammy is down in Brooklyn, and so the two of us being presidents of this organization, I have been running all of the events and things up here, and she's been settling a couple other things downstate, but now that she has some space for clarity, she is going to start co-creating some educational opportunities in the city area, along with like Brooklyn Psychedelic Society and the Psychedelic Assembly and any other groups that may come together. I know the New York State Bar Association has a presence down there. Correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, is that?
New York, New York State Bar Association does but New York City Bar Association is, specifically for that more active, and there is the psychedelic law subcommittee under the drugs, cannabis, and the law committee too. So, New York City Bar Association, yeah.
Cool. Okay, yeah. But that's one of the things that I'm excited about moving forward is we have been working with Colin Pugh from the Brooklyn Psychedelic Society, and we're just trying to settle on a location for a screening with the Reconsider folks. So Reconsider, for those of you who don't know, is one of the executive producers on Fantastic Fungi, and they have produced films featuring Joe McKay, Ethan Abend, who is a New York police officer, and a variety of other people from New York and from afar. And they actually are almost done with a short documentary film on our advocacy efforts. So we'll using footage that they captured at the Reconsider film that we did in Albany, some of our lobbying activities, and then we did another panel actually at the Capitol. And so we'll have that piece of media available soon to share as well. And then Joe, you have, I looked for the details on that reconsider screening on May 30th, right? Is that correct?
Let me check my calendar. Hold on one sec.
Because I wanted to.
Yeah, it's the one that's supposed to be a new pulse. Yeah, I don't have any other information. Steven's out of the country right now, so I don't know if you're gonna be able to get him.
Okay, well, I looked on the Reconsider website and I didn't see anything, so I wanted to share it and talk about it, but and I know I saw it somewhere, but I couldn't remember whether it was an email, a text, or an Instagram post, and there's too much information.
Yeah, I have no idea, David. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah. But
they tell me where to go, I show up. That's
good. So if that's going to be a new pulse, and then we're going to do another panel and discussion there as well. And then working with Assemblymember Burke, he has a place in mind in Buffalo, and we're going to do a reconsider screening out in Buffalo with some of the Buffalo City Council members and stuff out there. So really what we want to do is not only work at the state level, but get some local referendums and things like that going. Because if we can get some movement among like the larger cities, like, Buffalo and New York City, then, it's much more likely that we'll be able to make progress at the state level. Let's see, I guess we'll save the other couple things for after Scottie's presentation, because I don't want to use up more of your time than necessary. I appreciate you agreeing to come give us a picture of creating, where how you got to where you are, and creating setting in a spiritual religious context. And so Scottie, for those of you who didn't read the bio, he started the Soul Temple, which is a 501 something nonprofit religious group, but he also does mushroom retreats through mushroomretreat.org. And with that being said, let me make this presenter speaker view, and if everyone else could please mute your mic so Scottie can take over here. Do you have anything to share? Should I share screen, or are you just going to be talking?
I'll just be speaking, yeah.
Okay.
Unless people want to see some photos of the retreat center, I'll just be speaking, I guess. So first of all, really, Avery and Dr. Hoppe, thank you so much for the invitation. It's really an honor to be part of something like this. I love what you are all doing. It's very important. And there are cells of people like you all throughout the country, all doing a lot of really amazing work. So I just want to say mahalo, thank you for what you're doing. I was born and raised in New York, and moved out west in, I think it was my junior year in high school, and eventually, I lived 20 years up in the mountains of Colorado in a small town called Crested Butte, and I was a pro athlete up there skiing for about 13 years, and then eventually made my way to Hawaii. And so like most people, from a young age, starting in elementary school with flyers going around in elementary school talking about LSD and warning children not to take enough to where I thought all drugs were bad. And that carried over into my teen years. And, when you're a teenager, I would say starting at the age of 12, being exposed to cannabis and other drugs, I had no idea what people were talking about, whether it's mushrooms, mescaline, all kinds of things. And but from a young age, starting at 7, my father was a Rosicrucian, and he started teaching me spiritual things. I was raised Catholic until I was 7. And then once I was 7, he was just like, there's more things. And I'm like, I'm interested. And he started planting seeds about spirituality from a very non-dogmatic, very kind of personal journey type of space. And I had some interesting experiences from childhood, very, you could call them spiritual, supernatural, uh, things like outer body experience, experiencing entities, things like that. Not to get like too woo-woo, but just very things that were very unexplainable that you hear a lot of children talk about. And I never really shared any of them because I was in fear of people thinking I was a little nutty. But because of my spiritual upbringing, I started learning how to induce out-of-body experiences, which I had like a 50-50 success rate with. And when you have that type of experience, it's really scary. I don't know if any of you have ever had one or spontaneously, but the first time you do it, it's it's akin to your first psilocybin journey with 4 or more grams of that kind of fear, that like losing control of what's going on. Those experiences I started having in childhood, and then I learned how to induce them on my own. And so I lived an entirely sober life, including alcohol, up until about maybe about 10 years ago, maybe a little less than that. And it was because I wore my sobriety as like a badge of honor. And I had plenty of opportunity through my life, like many of us, to do all kinds of drugs, right? And I just rejected all of them. Even people who would say, you would actually like mushrooms. I'm like, nah, not for me. I Because of my activities as a pro athlete, I've had several major brain injuries and TBIs. And then I got hit by a garbage truck not too long ago. And within the last decade, and that really like scrambled my brains. I had symptoms that a team of neurologists said I would have for the rest of my life. Everything from seeing things, hearing voices in my head, not having any balance. I had to learn how to surf again. It was pretty disruptive to my life. And I had literally a team of different neurologists because I wanted the best care. And they all told me the same thing, like, you're going to have these the rest of your life. So I refused to accept that. I've always taken care of my body with nutrition, and I thought there was a nutritious way to do this, because essentially I was just dealing with brain inflammation at the microglial cell level. And the first thing I did was nutrition for brain health. And I started seeing all these studies about psilocybin, and including Imperial College in London, Dr. Roland Griffiths, may he rest in peace. What a great man. And so that's what brought me into using psilocybin mushrooms. And interestingly, the first 4 times that I tried them at pretty high doses, the first dose was 3 grams. First 4 times, nothing happened to me. And I'm like, I wonder if, because I've had these experiences my whole life and I could induce out-of-body experiences on my own, I wonder if like I'm living a psychedelic life. And so I took a pretty high dose the 5th time and it actually worked. And then I started microdosing a little bit. And within a few months, a lot of my symptoms just started to go to the wayside. But again, I was throwing the kitchen sink at it. Everything from nutrition, lifestyle, exercise, everything. So I don't know if psilocybin was the thing that helped me, but I do know that that it was a huge component of my healing for sure. Especially reading a lot more that's coming out lately about how psilocybin can help with inflammation of all kinds. So that's my personal story with psilocybin and how I got involved. And it was a really hard pill to swallow for me to not take quote unquote drugs, because one, I lived my entire life sober. And two, just that stigma that was attached to it. Even though that I knew cannabis was a plant medicine. I actually, way before I ever did psilocybin, when I was living in Colorado, I would donate money to the local organizations who were fighting to decriminalize cannabis. and I've never smoked pot in my whole life, but I was like, this is a plant. If it's helping people, it should be legal. So that's my journey on how I got involved. Um, how I started Soul Temple, which is a 508c13, or sorry, 508c1a, which is essentially, it's very similar to a 501c3, but it's specifically designated for religious or spiritual organizations. And there are two reasons for me wanting to start this. One was I wanted to, I started doing a little bit of speaking on this app called Clubhouse, which is how I met Dr. Agape 3 years ago. It's been already 3 years. And I realized there were a lot of people who were seeking certain types of information about spirituality. And a friend of mine and I decided to just start this organization as like a modern mystery school to just give free information and help people, guide them, because there's so much stuff on the internet that there's a lot of, predatory type of behavior on the internet of people doing readings for things and things like that. But where I come from is as much primary source material as possible, and then having experiences, which is really what spirituality is all about. It's not about a dogma, it's more about the experience. And then of course, the whole psilocybin thing, I was just like, this is a great pair for me to be able to start working with people using psilocybin. And so I started this nonprofit organization called Soul Temple, and I now live in Hawaii. And for the past several years, I've been helping people do their first journey, whether it be to heal some sort of addiction, some sort of mental health issues like depression and anxiety. And so I was already doing that before I started Soul Temple. So having that, the 1964 Civil Rights Act gives us freedom to practice religion, right? It's essentially civil rights, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And you hear about a lot of churches. There was actually pretty recently a big ruling about an ayahuasca church that made a deal with the DEA, and they essentially just fell under that umbrella of being allowed to practice any kind of religious practices that they deemed were part of their religious or spiritual beliefs. And I truly believe that plant medicine, if that is a part of someone's life, not necessarily from a recreational perspective, but a spiritual perspective. And of course, there's the benefits of healing. So that's where I come from, is there's the healing benefits, which are, it seems like every month I keep reading more and more of people who have been cured or helped with psilocybin for things that I didn't even know that psilocybin can do. And then, of course, the deep, profound spiritual experiences that you have. And so, which I'm going to kind of get into a little bit of that now, because doing this as a facilitator, there are people from all walks of life, as you all know, that need help. It could be for addiction, it could be depression, anxiety, PTSD, you name it. It never surprises me of how much, how deep this can help people and how deep it goes regarding the demographics and cross-section of people that are seeking help. We have had people who have come here to the retreat center who are, hardcore Christians. They go to church every Sunday. It's been, it's generational, but they have an addiction, or they have serious anxiety, or incontractable depression. And the way we present it is like, whatever, they ask the question, you are a church, do I have to become a member of your church or believe what you believe? And our answer is no, come with your own faith, because that's going to be important it could be very important on your journey, and it could very much well come up. And a lot of times it does. And at the end of their experience, they have a mystical experience. So they understand, like, Jesus was a mystic, meaning that a mystic isn't necessarily involved in the dogmatic institution of what their church teaches, but more of the experiences. And that's what Jesus was. So we've had people come here with very firm Christian, Western religious beliefs, and they have these mystical experiences that tie into their belief system, and it takes them to a whole nother level. So, so that's what we do here regarding Soul Temple and how it connects to the plant medicine that we're doing. But what's most profound, and in my experience, is, of course, the set and setting, which is the topic for tonight. So when I was the Soul Temple, the retreat center through mushroomretreat.org, is on the Big Island of Hawaii. We're in the rainforest on 5 acres. We are off grid. We get our energy from the sun. Our water comes from the rain. We're fully disconnected from everything. We have a really crappy Wi-Fi signal, or sorry, cell phone signal. And so I'm talking to you through Starlink right now. Before we were here, I was working with people on the island of Oahu. We have a place that I rent. It's our home there. It's right on the beach, on Sunset Beach, and it's this beautiful place. But there's a lot of noise, Wi-Fi signals, but at night it's pretty calm and quiet. It's not, it's a nice little neighborhood. So with my own experiences, I typically will walk out into the jungle and lay on the ground and have my journey when I feel called, and that's good for me. A lot of people don't feel comfortable walking into the jungle with nothing other than their facilitator. So I started doing these out of this loft in my home at Sunset Beach and helping people. And it was a good experience. But every now and then you might hear a dog bark in the background, or you may hear a neighbor or a kid cry, or a car driving by in the distance. And all of these things are distractions that can take you away from your journey, or take anyone away from their journey. For any of you that have done, anything, 3 grams or more, knows that you can become very self-conscious. You can become paranoid a little bit. You become hyper aware of your environment and your surroundings. And even if you are alone in your bed and you hear someone, I've had the experience of like, oh my God, my neighbors know I'm tripping on mushrooms right now, right? So my intent was to take that experience, and like they do in the Amazon, in the jungles of Peru, Ecuador, where they do ayahuasca and other plant medicines, they do them in the jungle because there's a very healing nature to nature. So we eventually got this place about 2.5 years ago, and the difference in experience working with people has been really profound on a few different levels. So which it has really just kind of solidified the way I facilitate, but also my belief on how important the set and setting is. So if anyone is new to this whole thing, set and setting, set is the mindset. Where's the mindset before someone comes in? If they are, if you just get home from work and you had a hectic day, or you had an argument with your spouse or your partner or anyone, or you got angry on the highway or whatever, the mindset that you have going into a journey will affect your journey, period. I have had my own personal experiences. I had watched a movie 7 days before I had done a deep journey. I'm not into horror movies, but I watched this movie called Bird Box, and I had the most bizarre, unsettling, dark experience because there was a scene in this movie that I had watched 7 days prior, that injected itself into my experience, and it didn't ruin the experience, but it definitely held it back from what it normally would be, to where if I didn't have the tools that I have to help direct my own journey, it would have been considered a bad trip. And a bad trip is when we have resistance to something, or there's some outside influences, or if we're in the wrong environment, which is the setting. So the mindset is really important going into it. So we have this whole protocol of, we ask people to do the best they can. Get off of social media. That's the most poisonous, toxic thing that we all can do. Even if no one is ever doing mushrooms, we should be using less social media. Unfortunately, it's just, it's a great thing that connects us all, but it's very addictive. They designed it like that. And even when you're mindful of it, we have this subconscious programming to where like this thing is in our hands or in our pockets all the time. And when it buzzes, we just feel compelled to do it. So we ask people to optimize your mindset. And again, this is all about optimizing. Social media, cut back or cut it out as much as possible. The music that you're listening to, if it's anything that could be violent or raise your blood pressure or get you super amped up, we ask them to reduce or cut back on that, or eliminate it totally for the 2 weeks leading up to their journey or arriving here. And then we also have a protocol of there's some required reading that we have people do. There's a book called the Kybalion, which goes over these 7 principles, which I'm not going to go into any great detail, but they're laws of the universe in the same way that we have the law of gravity on Earth, that it doesn't matter if you believe in the law of gravity or not. We are all at the effect of the law of gravity. So there are these universal laws, such as cause and effect, such as polarity, such as rhythm, the law of vibration. These are all principles that are very useful for the preparation of someone's journey with their mindset, during their journey, and then also the integration. And the integration process is a whole nother, of course, very important aspect, like crucially important, probably the most important part of it all. But these things help people prepare their mindset for their journey. And that book is called the Kybalion. And that book, I have had people who, again, are like very hardcore in their Christian faith or other, institutionalized religion, and they read that book and they understand it, because it's non-dogmatic. It's not preachy. It's like, there is this principle called polarity, and this is how it affects human beings. And then I help people understand how to integrate that into not just their daily life, but also while they're on their journey. All again for the mindset. And then other things as far as mindset too, we help people. I send them a breath work video on how to do some very basic breath work. A really basic Wim Hof method is usually all it takes, just to get people relaxing their nervous system. And then onto the setting. Once people arrive, my goal is there's no schedules other than there's certain things we're doing on certain days. But the whole idea is to relax the nervous system, to get them to unplug from everything. And what happens is people don't do their journeys when they come here until I think it's the 4th day here. And without exaggerating, 100% of the people that come here, before their journey comes, they all say, I feel like I don't even need to do mushrooms or to go on the journey, because I haven't taken my Xanax or Effexor or Zoloft or anti-anxiety since I've been here, and I feel really good, and I feel like everything's calm. So the setting alone, being surrounded, like I'm looking out the window right now, there's flowers and palm trees and plants everywhere. Uh, plants are very healing. We know that. And I'm not just talking about plant medicine, but I believe that all plants are medicine. And that when you're in that vibrational energy of a rainforest or any kind of forest for that matter, or you're out in the mountains, it's so much different than our default world of electronics and jobs and driving and cars and the news and all this stuff. And that's another important thing I forgot to mention. Any kind of news is a no-go before getting here. That 100% of the people, before they go on their journey, they already have the healing effect of nature, which is the setting. The setting is, every client that comes here, it just reinforces more and more how important the setting is. And when people would come to our place on Oahu, which again, it was in a townhome, in a loft, on the beach, beautiful view of the beach at night. People would have transformative experiences, but it's at a whole nother level when you take people out of an environment where they could hear a neighbor there, or they can hear a dog barking, or hear a truck or a car, or horns honking, or people talking, or a television, or an airplane flying over, or whatever it may be. And now I realize why these indigenous cultures, when they do their, you have shaman doing their practices, a huge component of that is merely the environment that they're in. So, but unfortunately, not everyone can go to a rainforest, or go to the mountains, or go to the forest, or go to a park where no one's going to be. So, we have people that are trip sitting for their friends and for their family, or for even strangers that need help, which is really great. Optimizing the setting, to me, is probably one of the most important aspects of this whole thing, because once you're in your journey and the medicine has kicked in, and you've launched, right? If any of these noises or distractions, or even people next to you, and that's the other thing I didn't mention, is we only work with people one-on-one in the setting or during the journey. We may have two people here at the same time, but they're in totally separate rooms. They're not together. Part of the setting is, who are you next to? Who are you doing your journey with? Now, I'm not knocking all of these other, there's, any kind of journey is going to be a good one if it's led and facilitated by good people that have experience, that keep safety in mind at all times, and then also provide integration. But if you're in a room full of people, or even one person, and they start having a panic attack, or they start crying or laughing, or that's going to affect your journey and redirect it. Everything that we hear, our sights, our sounds, until we're getting into like the 7-gram doses where we're just totally checked out of our immediate environment, we're subject to the environment. So if someone is on a journey and they need help, and there's other people in the room and they're feeling a little paranoid, are they going to be able to share or even ask the facilitator for help, because they may feel self-conscious? So for me, at least, I feel that if possible, if at all possible, you can have a journey with just your trip sitter or just your facilitator and no one else around. That is the most a major contributing factor to the setting, because you're minimizing distractions and you're optimizing your journey through this setting. The other aspect of the setting is daytime and nighttime. in my experience, not just my personal journeys, but also facilitating people, a day trip is going to show up much, much different than a night trip. And it's just, once the sun sets and it's dark outside, the vibe is different. Even when we're just in our default sobriety, everything is a little different. Once you're in a setting like a forest or a park or a rainforest, anything like that, those effects are potentiated, meaning more potent. So if you're in the more quiet of an environment that you're in, if you're experiencing a nighttime journey, the nighttime journey effects are going to be more potentiated. And same with the daytime. For the big journeys, what we do here is they're always at night. Usually right when the sun sets, people start to take the medicine. Depending on the person, it could take 30 minutes or up to 90 minutes for the medicine to start kicking in. And but we do it at night, primarily because that type of journey at night, the energy of the evening, if we think about what we're doing here, a lot of times the shadow aspect of ourselves is presented, and at nighttime is the perfect time to explore the shadow, so to speak. So it's not just different in my experience, but the people that I've worked with, they all say daytime is different. It's much easier to have an eyes closed experience as well, which is also part of the setting. When the eyes closed experience is where we get the transformative experiences. Having our eyes open, it's a totally different experience, as most of you have, or pretty much all of you that have done it. It's a totally different experience. It's fun. There's cool shit to look at. Excuse my language. There's cool things to look at. Especially nature, when you're looking at plants, you have a deep connection to things. Like I have connected with trees on a whole different level. I have connected with flowers and plants and ants on the ground at a whole different level when I'm on mushrooms. It makes us feel like we are all one. And that's the purpose of a day trip and a day journey. The way we do it is we want people to remind themselves or be reminded that they are not separate from nature, but they are part of nature. We all come from nature. Because of our lives now, we are so connected to electronics and all these things I had mentioned earlier that we forget that our humanness is very much part of the natural world. So the day trip is really a really important component, depending on what the person is actually looking for. We do 2 journeys here, a lighter day trip and the big nighttime journey is a much bigger dose. And most people that are coming here, that are paying for retreats, they're here for addiction, they're here for PTSD, they're here because they want to get off their medications. And an eyes closed, blindfolded, dark room, maybe with a couple of candles lit, is where these types of healing experiences tend to occur, in my experience, not just my personal, but also the clients that come in. But the biggest thing I want to stress, though, is again, it's if we're helping people or even helping ourselves, doing things right, there's a lot to be said, right? We just recently had a client that addicted to nicotine, maxed out on his dosage for his antidepressant, and there was and also caffeine, and this person was a professional athlete and they had a very tight schedule, and I'm like, okay, first you have to get off these things, but he did what do you call it? A triple crown or a trifecta of cold turkeys. And it was really challenging. So when we're preparing people the right setting isn't just also the environment, it's the setting within the body. And that's where the mindset comes in and connects with the setting within the body, the physical things that we're putting in the body. Whether it's pharmaceuticals or cannabis, that's another big one where you have people who are addicted to cannabis and they don't even realize it. The whole idea is to not have to have something we take and use every day, right? I think microdosing is great, but we're not meant to be microdosing mushrooms for our whole lives in the same way we're not meant to be taking Zoloft for our whole, until the day we die. I think that when we provide the right setting going into these journeys, then we get these optimal experiences and optimal effects and like truly transformative experiences. So the setting of all of it, it begins before people get here. It begins before the journey. And in all of those ways that I mentioned, but the body is a big component of that. The body is an ecosystem in itself, and it shouldn't be avoided. And this also kind of goes into where they have the dieta with when you go do ayahuasca with a shaman in South America. We have something similar, and again, we just ask people like, look, we truly want you to have the best, not just the best experience, but like whatever it is you're trying to heal, we have a genuine interest in you coming like one and done, right? The way to get there is to optimize the mindset and the setting of the body, and then we take care of the rest once you're here, which is the setting, the jungle, the energy of the jungle, the quietness of the space, the darkness or the lightness of the room. The last thing I'll talk about too is how we actually cultivate the setting during the journey. Is that what I've learned is that you hear mushrooms or plants have a certain intelligence. Well, the mushroom, and this may be an unpopular opinion, but in my experience, like the mushroom is not intelligent. The mushroom has the key to open the door to your innate intelligence, to your higher self. The mushroom doesn't know the thing that's growing out of the ground or curated and with love and like what Avery's doing, cultivating these mushrooms. The mushroom's intelligence is the way the key fits in the human being. It will open the door. But all of us, like those mushrooms, they don't know what we need, but they know how to open the door to get to where we need to go. And that's how I see this whole thing. So how that ties into the setting is how that ties into how we facilitate as well. The setting isn't just all of the things I had just mentioned, but it's also during the facilitation process. I am not guiding anyone's experience. I'm there to make sure, first and foremost, they are safe. From harming themselves, or some people, they can't even walk. They need help going to the bathroom. No one gets sick ever, but some people have very physical experiences to where, their sinuses blow up and things are just coming out of their body. So as a facilitator, cultivating the setting of safety is the most important. So if you're trip sitting, your number one job is safety for the person, which is a huge component or part of the setting. And then the other thing is, we're not guiding anyone's experience. Their innate intelligence is doing that. Their higher self is doing that. Their higher mind is doing that. Their higher level of consciousness. And that's what the mushrooms do. They open the door to expand our consciousness. And once our consciousness is expanded, we are now in touch with our innate intelligence to where it knows what to do. And that's, in my experience or my belief up to this point, is where the healing comes from. It's not the psilocin or the psilocybin, that is the key. It fits and it unlocks our consciousness to allow the expansion that's needed for us to realize and see how, you know, how we can heal whatever it is we're trying to heal. So we sit back and we don't play music unless something is specifically requested. Silence is beautiful. It's a beautiful music in itself. If someone feels too uncomfortable and they need a little bit of music, we may do that. I had a really wild, there's no coincidences, right? Cause and effect. There's no such thing as chance, no such thing as coincidence. But we had a client here a couple months ago, lifelong, intractable depression, went through literally every drug, maxed out on every drug, and nothing has ever worked. He came here, he was nervous about his experience, and we got him to this space during his night journey, and he was a little inside of his head, and we're, just helping him stay present. And then he said, "Hey, do me a favor. Can you just find a little bit of background music to play?" Okay. So I literally get on YouTube and I type in psilocybin journey music. And there's thousands of them. And I'm scrolling through in the other room. I'm like, what do I choose? And I'm trying to listen. So I just pick one. I listen to the first couple minutes of it. I go in the room and play it. And he said, "Is that my phone?" I'm like, "No, this is my phone." He's just like, "I've listened to this before," because this gentleman had done psychedelics in the past. And he said, "I've listened to this before." And I'm like, and so I thought, okay, this is just him on mushrooms thinking he's heard it. After so the music helped him. When he finally came back to baseline consciousness, he again said, "Yeah, that's the music I listen to." Still thinking the mushrooms had something to do with that. The next day, he pulls up his phone, shows me the history, his YouTube history, and he had that one saved. How does that happen? Anyway, it's just a weird, funny story. So, but the whole point of that was that the medicine does the work, meaning that it unlocks the door. It's the person. It's the person's innate intelligence. It's their higher self that does the healing. And we have to optimize that with the setting. Once we have the proper setting, we optimize everything, we make everything just right, take them out of their busy environments, get them off their phones, off of the news, off of social media, all of these things. Once we have this optimal setting, then their higher self knows what to do. There's no other distractions. And it's truly miraculous of like of what this medicine actually does. And when I say that, again, it's unlocking the door to our higher selves. It just knows how to do it. So the importance of the setting and the mindset, every client that we have that come through here, every person that I've worked with, it just continually reinforces the idea that the setting and the mindset going into it is paramount. And then, of course, the integration is important, but the topic for today is the set and setting. And what I've learned through being here in the rainforest is that the indigenous cultures had it right. You get people out of their natural environment, meaning which is very unnatural. You get them into a truly natural environment, and then magic happens. And I see it all the time. So I'll stop there. And if anyone has any kind of questions or anything, but I hope that kind of gave a good overview of my perspective on things and how we practice here as a retreat center, and how we facilitate.
Beautiful. Thank you, Scottie. Yeah. Um, I know I have some questions.
I have
Anyone?
some questions.
Yeah. Cordelia, go ahead.
Oh, I
Can-
go first?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you for that. I have two questions. Try not to take up too much time for questions, but one of them is set and setting. The other one is more about the legalization aspect. But for set and setting, I love that you brought up the Kabbalion because that's sort of my Bible. And I love that you said that you have people read it because I would have never thought to do that. I also run retreats, just sort of off the cuff, not a business model like you have, but I rent out a space in nature. And the Kabbalion made me think about one of the principles being the masculine and feminine energy. Do you facilitate with a female energy, or do you solely facilitate? Because I know a lot of people sometimes try to bring in a male and a female when they sit with someone.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a really good question. So this will get a little esoteric. So, which, of course, it's mushrooms, right? So the sun is masculine, right? The sun. So daytime, masculine energy, even though we're in Mother Nature, right? Nighttime, the moon is the feminine energy. We have this tapestry in the ceremony room with this with both the sun and the moon together. And when my wife Nicole is part of this facilitation process, we usually do a cacao ceremony beforehand. And cacao ceremonies, they say it's heart opening, but there's a scientific reason, which I don't know how the heck the indigenous cultures, the wisdom that they hold is pretty incredible, but theobromine dilates your capillaries. Capillaries, obviously, it's part of the cardiovascular system. So it's heart opening from a scientific perspective. You have cacao, your capillaries dilate. So my wife is the one who leads that. So she brings in the feminine energy. And then, but before people come here, we do two like coaching sessions. They have to read the Kybalion first, and then I coach them on that a little bit, and I help them understand the principles. And then, of course, the masculine and feminine. So I teach this stuff every Sunday. That's how I've met Dr. Agape. And the reason why I'm here is because of her, essentially. The masculine and feminine energy. So it has little to do with biological sex. For those of you that have no idea what the heck I'm talking about, the masculine and feminine are just energies. They physically manifest in the material world as human beings as biological male, biological female, because for anything in creation to manifest, you have to have both the masculine and feminine energy coming together. So the word gender, gen, when you break down the etymology of it, gen means to generate. It means to create, to beget, right? So when the masculine and feminine energies come together, they are coming together to produce. If we have an imbalance of one or the other, well, all kinds of symptoms can show up. Over masculinity. The masculine is the will, the doing. The feminine is the intuition, the imagination, the nurturing, the receiving, and the masculine is about the giving. So depending on the person will really depend upon, I don't want to say focus, but the amount of time that we spend with people here for a 6-day retreat, it's pretty incredible. So we get to sit down with them for a long time. And after the first day, I get a pretty good idea of if they're too much in their masculine or too much in their feminine. And then I just bring this to their attention. And literally just by asking questions, never by telling people anything. It's literally prompting, it's like prompting AI, asking a question. You ask the right questions and you get, these people will give you the answers. And when they hear the answers, they're learning. And so the answers are coming from within, and which is the same way we facilitate. So regarding the masculine and feminine energy, it really just depends on the person, but this is a whole different kind of rabbit hole. But when it comes to masculine and feminine energy, we just help people understand what that is. We help them identify through questions and their own answers if they're sitting too much in their masculine and too much in their feminine. Nicole and I, my wife, we both represent the masculine and feminine energy in the room at the time. We again make people aware that the masculine and feminine energies are coming together, because what are we trying to do? The masculine and feminine is all about generation and creation. We are trying to generate and create a transformation. And so that's why we try to make sure they integrate both of them with harmony and balance. So I hope that answered your question. It's a good question.
Thank you, though. That was actually really insightful and helpful for me. Thank you.
Yeah.
My other question was, when Hawaii is part of the United States, so technically not legalized for psilocybin, is there, because you're a nonprofit in the religious context, does that allow you to do what you're doing?
So here's how this whole thing works, is that from a federal, there was a big case recently. There's a guy, he's our attorney, Greg Lake. He and Avery, I'll send you his link. But he follows all of the case law that goes along. But there was I think it was called like Church of the Condor or something like that. There was an ayahuasca church. They kind of gotten into a tangle with the DEA because of how they were transporting the medicine, because there was a central church and then they were bringing ayahuasca to different states. Essentially, it's a Schedule I drug according to the DEA. So they were, drug smuggling according to the DEA. So this church invoked their religious freedoms. And it was the first time in history where we had an entheogenic church make a deal with the DEA without going to court. This is literally just, them talking it out. So you have the federal government fully recognizing that any citizen in the United States has the absolute right to express their religious freedoms and beliefs. And it doesn't matter what they are. We have people that believe in all kinds of things. I remember in San Diego, there was like a death cult, and the Heaven's Gate people. And, unfortunately, that ended a lot of lives, but those people had the right to believe whatever they wanted to believe. I'm not a big fan of cults. I don't think anyone is. But when we are truly practicing our religion, like I truly believe that the experience of psilocybin mushrooms, it puts you in touch with creation. Which is nature and a higher state of consciousness. That is my spiritual belief, and no one can tell me otherwise. The federal government recognizes these things. Locally, just say you're in a really conservative state and you're doing a mushroom ceremony and they somehow got wind of it. The ignorance of local law enforcement will do what they think their job is and arrest you because you might have psilocybin. So local law enforcement is really more of an issue than federal law enforcement. With that said, at that point, if something like that would ever happen, you have an absolute defensible case. If you have a proper church set up where you are in a recognized religious organization like Soul Temple, it's not hard to do. You have to have a board, you have to have, federal tax ID number, all of this other stuff. But if in your statement of beliefs and your bylaws, you're psilocybin, ayahuasca, whatever it is, any kind of plant medicine, cannabis, if that is part of your spiritual beliefs, the federal government cannot prosecute you for that. The local government may make you defend yourself, but that will go away pretty quickly if you have a good enough attorney, and there are attorneys that specifically are practicing entheogenic law. Yeah, I know Avery is working with one. So it's really a matter of locality. And nowadays, now we have fentanyl. It used to be crack. It used to be meth. Local cops, if you were practicing something with responsibility, I don't think the local police officers really care. Unless someone is being really blatant about it, and selling. There was a case pretty recently up in San Francisco where there was a mushroom church selling mushrooms to their people, and that was they had to defend themselves. But to me, like, that's just stupid. I like, as a church, you have to be in service, right? So part of the experience here, we just tell them like, hey, I don't care if it takes 10 grams to get you to where you need to be. I'm not going to keep charging you for every gram that you take. We're not selling mushrooms. We are providing a safe space. We're providing the experience. We're providing integration. We're providing meals. We're providing lodging. We're providing emotional support, spiritual support, all of these things, not selling anything. If someone wants some psilocybin to take home to microdose with or something, and they feel safe traveling with it, sure, we'll give it to them. Not selling it. The last thing you want to do is put yourself into a position of looking like a drug dealer, because there's a lot of ignorance out there. And I was once part of that ignorance because of what I was taught by all kinds of adults and TV and Nancy Reagan, so there's a lot of ignorance out there. There's a lot of fear, and we have to be aware of that. But when it comes to the legalities of it, we have a constitution, we have civil rights, and we are absolutely protected by them. And I operate with zero fear. I operate with, it's not even on my radar, like it's a concern. Just because cops have their hands full with all kinds of other things.
One of the things, Allison Hoots is the law practitioner who focuses on the Religious Freedom Act, and she's helped a lot of people establish churches. But one of the things, just sort of reflecting the responsibility of a lot of psilocybin users, is we proposed a decriminalization referendum to the city of Troy. And one of our local assembly members attended that meeting, and he had done an arrest search over the last 5 years, specifically looking for psilocybin arrests, and there have been 0. And so it's not decriminalized, but people who are consuming it, growing it, and sharing it are doing so in a manner that's not threatening anyone's safety or security. And so they're not hitting the local law enforcement's radar whatsoever. So that's, it sounds like you have established such a respectful and considerate environment that it's, there's no need, because it's not a hazard.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is that you have people, I watched this happen with cannabis, to where people use habitual use of cannabis as an excuse of like, well, I'm getting in touch with my spirituality. But they're the type who just wake and bake. And I'm not judging them, but what I'm saying is, like, we have to be honest. We have to be genuine and authentic in what we believe in. I don't have a belief. I know that these things, these entheogens, connect people with, whether you call it God, creator, spirit, higher state of consciousness. It's a knowing, and I know that through experience. So, which is interesting, because as when you start a church, you have to have a statement of beliefs, and we had to write these statements, and I'm like, I feel like we should have a state of knowing as well, because knowing is different than believing, So, but yeah, I think if anyone is going to start their own church, there has to be some, in my view, if we're to do this right, every Sunday on this app called Clubhouse for over 3 years. I give a talk on spirituality. So it has nothing to do with psilocybin, because psilocybin is just one component of what we do as a church. That doesn't mean that you can't just have a mushroom church. You absolutely can. There are people who do it, but they also do things like what you guys are doing there. You gather, you talk about things, you're doing things, you're helping people. That is very much what a church does. So as long as our actions are in alignment with what we believe in, meaning we're not just growing and selling them and calling ourselves a church. We're actually doing good. We are in service to people. I think you have nothing to worry about.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the good question.
I know there were a bunch of chat comments. Does anyone online have any questions?
I would just like to throw out there that Mr. Lake's interpretation of the protections that are afforded currently under the law are tend to diverge from many of us who practice in the area and are viewed as much more expansive. And I would consult with somebody before engaging in expecting to have these protections available. Allison Hoots is an excellent attorney to reach out to. There still is a potential. The government is not prohibited from prosecuting you because you've formed a church. They aren't at the moment, for the most part, because they don't want to get in front of the Supreme Court, this particular Supreme Court, because of their leaning towards expanding religion. But there's no such thing as a prohibition on them coming after you, to be clear. That's all. Thanks. And they shouldn't be, from my perspective, either. It's horrible, but
yeah. I think I think that the thing to just always keep in mind is that if you have a DA who just doesn't like mushrooms, and even though they understand what the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is, it doesn't have to stop them, because it's still listed as a Schedule I, right? So it's up for interpretation. So sure, they can absolutely, it's not decriminalized. But we have these two conflicting things here. We have religious freedom, and then we have these plant medicines, which are very spiritual in nature, and which are illegal at the moment. So which one presides over the other, right? And so I think the thing to remember is there is a defensible case no matter what. Could there be a headache? Sure, absolutely. And if you are going to start a church, I would just say know your local political leanings. See what important crimes are trying to be fought, know what the DA's positions are on these types of things. And then also doing what you were all doing, educating the public that, cat's out of the bag. This is not addictive. It will be rescheduled. And I think that, look at what happened in Utah recently. Utah is a really good example of what you just mentioned, where you have a very conservative state. Like, it's Mormon country, hardcore. It's where Mormonism was more or less, well, it wasn't born there, but the modern version of it is. And they passed this, freedom, like their own Freedom of Religion Act, which protects people very much in alignment with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And that's a conservative government over there. So, which is super encouraging to me. So I think knowing your jurisdiction is important.
It's important too, because RFRA does not apply at the state level. RFRA only applies to federal actions. So So state governments under RFRA can still proceed with a prosecution against you. That's why, like, Utah basically enacted and codified and adopted the RFRA protections at the state level, and a number of states have done so. So yeah, you're absolutely correct that it's important to know what the individual law is there, and which protections exist and which don't.
Yeah.
And I do want to just point out, Claire had mentioned that not all demographics of people are treated the same by local law enforcement. So, I mean, being aware of, what their actions are is also useful.
Also,
Absolutely.
socioeconomic disparities too.
Yep.
To mount like really effective defense is going to take a significant amount of resources. And I mean, honestly, the public defender is not going to understand a religious freedom RFRA defense. So there's definitely also, there's a racial context to it, and also socioeconomic context to it also.
I have my question, Scottie. Why did you? I mean, you've only done single person journeys over those 6-day periods. Is that's?
So we work with couples also. And then in the past, before we came to the Big Island on Oahu, I've worked with no more than 2 people in the room at the same time, but those people knew each other and wanted to journey together. But one of them had an addiction, but so getting back, here's the thing, like the group integration can be really powerful, but there are still, even with that, like I'm a big fan of group integration because people are sharing experiences and they're getting used to like talking about these types of things with total strangers. However, there's still always going to be people who, for whatever reason they don't want to share what they went through as a child. They don't want to share the trauma that or whatever it may be. So the integration part, I think having that available as a practitioner is important, because there are people who just don't feel comfortable in large groups, So there's things that I want to do, other entheogens I want to do, and I haven't found a practitioner who isn't going to charge me $10,000 to have a one-on-one. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Does anyone know? I have a couple. David? Yeah.
I was wondering about if you collect any data as you were performing these retreats. So, like, how did you settle on 6 days, for example? If you take someone out of the setting after 6 days, do they go back to old habits, or have you done any longitudinal studies on, how effective these journeys can be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, earlier I said I use the term one and done, which sometimes that does happen and sometimes it doesn't. So as far as the data goes, am I collecting data other than my journal that I keep? I have like a book of, I take very copious notes from beginning to end, from literally the screening call until they leave, including their integration. But as far as like aggregating that data, I don't do that. In my experience, the integration is so important. So do people go back to their old habits? I did have someone who was trying to quit smoking. This was a few years ago on Oahu. They came out, they flew out from California, and they were like, I need to quit smoking, this type of thing, went through the whole thing. It wasn't a 6-day program. Although actually, yeah, they were out actually for about 5 days. But once they got back in their regular environment, the person didn't do integration, and a few weeks later started smoking again. So, and that's why I say we want to optimize pre-journey. We want to optimize the set and setting. And then the integration part, as a facilitator, you know, it's my responsibility to follow up with them, which I do, because, you know, the integrity of this is where the integrity of the facilitator or the retreat center really kind of sets people apart. I want people to be helped, right? So that's part of being in service. And the only way that that's going to happen, knowing that sometimes we need accountability partners for things, right? We all have our weak spots. So my job at that point is the accountability partner. So they go home with an integration workbook, and then I follow up with them. I'll send them texts, and then we have a few integration calls where I talk to them. I ask them, have you been doing the workbook? No, I haven't. Okay. Well, how are you feeling? I still feel okay. Okay, great. Print that workbook out, more pages of it, and do it, because there's measurable things, you know, ranging from how did I sleep to how do I feel today to did I feel like, you know, engaging in my habit, you know, all kinds of things. The integration part really makes or breaks whether or not someone goes back to their old habits. We can only do so much, right? You know, it's like, you know, I'm not a parent, I don't have a child, but I can imagine that you know, when you raise a child and by the time they're 18 or 20, they leave the house, you want to be there for them and help them along the way, but they're going to have to help themselves at some point. So we set them up with all the tools. We optimize everything that we can. We send them home with things. We schedule calls. But at the end of the day, if someone puts themselves in the environment where if they're trying to quit smoking and they're hanging out with their smoking buddies, you know, again, they're putting themselves in that setting to where it could put them back on track again, or is it off the wagon, on the wagon? I don't know what. So anyway, but no, I don't keep any kind of data other than the notebooks that I have of people that I've worked with.
I may just ask a follow-up. Do you provide that same set of workbooks or questionnaires before they enter the journey?
We have an intake form. It's pretty extensive. And then the intake form is much different than the integration workbook. And the integration workbook is not one that I've come up with, where I'm making my own right now, but the integration workbook that I point them to is one that a couple from Texas, it's called the Condor Approach. I send them a link to that, and they get to print it out and go from there. But before they leave here, we sit down, I go over the entire thing with them. And, you know, there's some parts of it that I don't think are necessarily relevant, that I tell people they don't have to do a certain part. But as far as the daily check-ins, before they leave here, I go through that with them. We spend a lot of time on it, actually. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You mentioned something very briefly and kind of humorously, but it touches to me what's really sort of the elephant in the room, for at least for myself. I'm very interested in a high dosage guided experience. I did tons of hallucinogens when I was a kid. I have dabbled, you know, as an adult, but really just dabbled. And part of me is fucking intimidated as hell, scared about it. You know, I have no doubt about the intensity and the potential of a strong hallucinogenic experience. The legality issue affects the insurance issue in a huge way. You know, the fact that it's illegal, insurance doesn't cover this, and I haven't done a lot of investigating into the cost at a church like yours. Which sounds terrific. You know, I love the sound of what you're doing. Aside from just getting to Hawaii, you know, I understand that anything like this has to have cost. You've got to cover your overhead. Unfortunately, what that means is I'm 65, I'm retired. I make a little bit of money private chefing, but I don't have money in the bank, to cover stuff like this. It means that people who are on a fixed income or people who don't make a lot of money, it, don't. It's very, very hard to find a way to experience this in this kind of a safe setting, because you don't have $10,000, like you said,
Yeah.
spend on it, and that's a real issue. I mean, that really limits the people who are able to take advantage of this. I grew some very, very potent mushrooms. I could sit at home and do 5 grams and hope for the best, but that's intimidating. That's
Yeah.
have some guidance and be in a safe place that make at least with me it opens a door which I'm willing to walk through. So that's what how do you address that, especially I'm sure, like I said, you have overhead, you have to cover that, you need to pay yourself. It really limits many people's ability to walk through that door.
Yeah. So, the first thing I would say to that is, like, if there's someone in the area, there's a lot of people that have a lot of experience doing this type of thing. I don't go to the conventions. I don't go to a lot of, like, this is really, other than doing some speaking on Clubhouse, where, a couple of years ago, there'd be like 1,000 people listening to the conversation at one time. But I don't go to the big popular psilocybin conventions. There's a lot of people like me that are responsible, that may be in your area. How do you find them? That's the other thing, right? So networking, maybe going to other events like something like this. You could find someone to where you don't have to go travel. But then there's always, interviewing, understanding that, again, this whole topic is about set and setting. And is it comfortable for you? Is it safe? Is it, is it a good fit? There's a lot that goes into it. So there's all kinds of retreat centers out there. You look at what's happening in Oregon, there are waiting lists. We have people calling us from Oregon who they're on an 8-month waiting list to go to one of the legal retreat centers out there. And there's more and more popping up. However, you're going to pay for literally there's some facilitators out there that are charging $6,000 for one night, which is, to me, preposterous. But I understand there's requirements, there's licensing and all this stuff, there's overhead. That's why I believe that what we're doing here, we're set up as a church, we're a nonprofit. What we're charging here for a 6-day retreat, which is literally all inclusive from the time the plane hits the ground to the time you leave, like everything's taken care of. And the amount of time, like per hour, I'm probably getting paid like maybe $5 an hour or less. But I love doing it and I love helping people. And we've made it literally as affordable as possible. We're charging, like, I think it's $2,700 for a 6-day experience. And again, meals and everything. And most people who go on a vacation, they're going to be spending more than that, just on lodging and transportation, and maybe a few meals. So because we're a church, we have a little bit of other revenue coming in. We have other facilitators coming here hosting their own retreats, so we get revenue from that. So, I know people are price sensitive, and I think it's just like healthcare, where I think everybody should have a certain level of healthcare at a very, very much baseline in the United States. It's almost like a birthright. I feel the same way about this, but like you said, there's costs involved. So we just try and make it as affordable as possible. And be in service. And I think, you know, if you find a church that's set up similar to like we are, that has a very similar philosophy where it's not a profit model. Like we're not making a profit here. You know, we have 5 acres, we have farms, we have a bunch of structures that we've built for people to stay in, like cost a lot of money. You know, we're not making a profit. All 100% of it goes in. There's other retreat centers out there, and I'm a capitalist. Like I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. Make a profit, sure, but I do believe that if you are going to set yourself up as a church, it shouldn't be as an excuse to capitalize on this whole, you know, emerging industry, if we want to call it an industry. I think that if people are going to go about it as a church, there needs to be a certain amount of integrity. There should be scholarships for people that can't afford it. Whatever model that you can make it affordable to people that normally wouldn't be able to afford it, I think that would be the right thing to do.
And I would love to continue this conversation, but it is 8:30 already, and
Yeah.
I did have a couple other things I wanted to go over. Scottie, thank you so much. I know Doug posed, you know, something about other streams, revenue streams. You know, hopefully we can, you know, share some contact information or something, if people want to continue talking. And thank you so much for joining us. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor, and it's really cool that you guys are in New York. I was born in New York. My mom's actually listening in.
Oh, nice.
She's from Brooklyn originally. So yeah, it's been really great. Thank you, Dr. Agapi, for the introduction.
Thanks,
Really nice to
Scottie.
see you. Good to see you in person.
Pleasure having you, yes.
All right,
Yeah.
let's see, what else did I have? Okay, so the talking points for those of you who tuned in last month, we talked about how to have discussions with our family, friends and family members. And one of the things we did afterwards was just went to Chat GPT and put in, how do I tell my mom I'm using psilocybin? and it spit out an absolutely wonderful synopsis of what to do. So I haven't revisited it since then, but I want to, you know, shoot out a couple other little, like, you know, things and then pull it apart to make it a digestible, like, bulleted thing, so that you can go to Thanksgiving and be like, hey, this is, you know, this is what's going on. Because, you know, having dialogue, conversations with people is really how we work to create change. And, you know, the more people understand why it's important that they respect the choices that we're making and the things that we're doing, that, you know, the easier it is to create that change. I am going to work with Taylor, who is our media person-ish, to add a page, 2 pages to our website. So one is going to have those, like, starter conversation resources. Another is going to have just like some of the media that we have kind of shared, especially like links to the Reconsider videos and stuff. And then, well, a third, Allison Hoots wants to create a resource page for, well, anybody really, but primarily for legislators to go to, or that we can point to and say, here's all the research that reflects why this is necessary, that people have access to these substances. The Committee on Medicinal Mushrooms for May that I attended on this past week, we had Jeff Chilton on as a webinar speaker, and Jeff Chilton is actually the gentleman in Canada who is providing all of the psilocybin to Health Canada. And so I'm gonna get in touch with him and, like, have see if he wants to come on to talk to us, but just as a resource to, like, oh, well, what pitfalls are you encountering in, like, providing a whole country's psilocybin supply right now. Allison also asked that and Allison Hoots is our head legal or Policy Council, I think is her title, official title. But she attended Horizons, and Robert, if you could take a couple minutes in a second to talk about Horizons, but she asked that I create a LinkedIn profile for NYMHA. So NYMHA now has a LinkedIn profile, and I'm going to start kind of, I guess that's a more business oriented, respectable social media. I don't know what all these things are, so I'm being helped by people much smarter than I am. And Noah Potter, who is on the New York Bar Association psychedelic council, whatever Robert said before, he has put together a psychedelic law reform in New York State Bar Association sponsored event that non-members can also attend. And it's on the New York State Bar Association website. And it's on May 21st, I believe. And the speakers are going to be Noah Potter, Karen Gallinari from the Pace University, Yerlex Estrada from the Alliance for Collaborative Drug Checking, Assemblymember Pat Burke, Senator Natalia Fernandez, Beth Roxland, who works with bioethics, Brett Waters from Reason for Hope, and Allison Hoots from Hoots Law Practice. So that is going to be an amazing opportunity to discuss how things changing at the federal level and how things changing at the state level and in local municipalities can overlap and possibly come into conflict, and how we can resolve those things. So that's going to be a really awesome talk. I believe it's May 21st. That's the one thing I didn't write down. But May 21st, I think it's like at 7 o'clock. I'll yeah, I will. Yeah. Did anyone else go to Horizons over the last week? I know, Joe, you went to a couple things, or did you were just in the city on other business, or?
No, I spoke at the Cohen Foundation event after. It was like one of the after events of the conference.
Horizons adjacent.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what so Joe and I also participated in a Horizons adjacent event with Pammy and Aaron Ganuth talking about policy in New York. And so, but Robert, you went to some of the Horizons things?
I was only there for the Saturday event, but what I did see was very powerful. It was very interesting. Also, one of the things that one of the beginning kind of lectures was on analysis of kind of the Berkeley psychedelic use research survey that was done, and the results of that. And it was surprising. It was positive with a lot of perceptions, especially regarding medicalization, things like that. But it was also concerning too that like more than 50% of people believed that psychedelics were addictive, and more than 50% of people in the public believed that their use was generally bad for health, things like that. But it was really fascinating analysis. One of the most powerful things was a group of Palestinian activists in Palestine and Israeli activists from Israel who met together, and they meet in groups and experience ayahuasca ceremonies, and have found kind of incredible healing and common ground, and seeing that kind of unity and in face of such a divisive conflict was really powerful. Allison gave an amazing talk on religious use and religious freedom, and the evolving nature of religious law. And also too, it's anybody next year, I would, if you have the opportunity, I'd highly encourage anybody to attend, because it is kind of a smaller event that provides more opportunity to speak with people. And it's also too, it doesn't really have, I mean, I didn't go to the business day, but for the most part, it doesn't seem to have nearly that sort of business sort of vibe that a lot of these things tend up having. It's more of a policy sort of higher level sort of, focus, rather than, commercialization, sort of like, some of them are more focused on, not that in its own doesn't have its own potential place.
Awesome, thanks, Robert.
Brooklyn Psychedelic Society after rave was a hell of a fun time. them to.
Beautiful. Well, again, thank you, Scottie, for spending some time with us and talking about your space. And hopefully, I win the lottery and I can fly you all out there and we can hang out.
Yeah, come out anytime.
Wonderful. And
Bye, Scottie.
yeah, so thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you again. Thank you so much. And I answered Doug's question in the chat.
Oh,
So,
beautiful. Okay, great. Thanks.
yeah. Okay. Thank you guys. Aloha.
Bye.
Aloha.
Wow.